So Mitch, you're heading into this session yourself, aren't you? Because
we're gonna be going in. So I'm gonna be having
pizza. Because now Daniele's be talking about pizza. I want pizza.
I'm really fancying pizza.
Okay. I'm ordering pizza, folks. Anyone else? Anyone else?
So our next session coming up. Very excited to welcome our next two guests. We have from West Indies Rum Distillery in Barbados, the master distiller Don Benn, and from Plantation Rum, Alexandre Gabriel. So very excited to welcome you both into the stage. I think we've got some, we just need to turn down the speakers a little bit, guys. We need to get them down to about 70%-ish, we found is the sweet spot. How's that sounding? Oh, that sounds better. Hello, welcome.
Hi, Mitch. Hi, Don. How are you doing?
Hi, guys.
How are you? I'm literally here just to say hey, and I'm going to be watching backstage and ordering Mitch pizza because I am PA.
Thank you. Hi, guys.
No anchovies for me, please.
No anchovies.
Yeah, Don hate the anchovies. I will take the anchovies. I love them.
So double anchovies for Alexandre and no anchovies for Don. I like it.
Give me the anchovies.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the session. I'll be back at the end just to kind of say hey, but I'm super excited to hear what you guys have to say because it sounds like you're doing some fun stuff. So,
okay.
For now, exit stage right.
All right.
See you, Don.
Hello,
Mitch,
welcome. How are you both?
Doing great. Mitch, do you have the presentation to push it? Because I didn't get to put it on this computer. I was at production right now. So you want me to download it?
That's a good question. Don't worry about it right now. We'll chat for a little bit right now, and we'll see if our magical tech team in the background can.
Okay.
We have a gentleman called Billy who's with us for the entire 24 hours backstage, and he's making magic happen with all different things. So I'll see if he can come in the room and sit that for us.
If you need it, if I can share from my screen, I might be able to put it up as well.
Thank God Don is here.
Yeah.
You know how you want to go, and I'm good with that.
That's cool. Well, let's do that then, Don.
Okay.
So first of all, before we get started, though, I'd like to sort of introduce the concept of the session and where we're going with it. Also, we've titled this session "Barrels at Sea: The Dynamic Aging Experiment." And one of the things that I'm interested in researching more, especially with black tartan, our history of Navy rum and shipping barrels all across the world, is this idea of aging cask at sea. I know you guys have done a lot of research in it, and it's something that we're gonna dive into a lot with this session. But first of all, Alexander, obviously, I think the rum world knows you very well, and famously at the head of Plantation Rum. But Don, if for people who haven't met you yet, perhaps it would be great to have a little introduction. Could you introduce yourself and share people a little bit about your role as master distiller at West Indies and how long you've been there, please?
Okay, sure, Mitch. Pleasure to be here again today. I know it's a world famous day, and you're doing 24 hours. Actually, I thought it was a little bit less, but hope you can make it the full 24.
So do I.
So go easy on the drinks for now. Right. So some people know me. My name is on the screen, Don Benn, Barbadian by birth. I live and work in Barbados, and what better place to work than West Indies Rum Distillery? We are located on the western coast, going south of Barbados. I've been here for, I guess, going 22 years now, almost. And I mean, in that time, I started out really involved in the distillation fermentation areas. Over time, it has branched out into several other areas of the rum process. So the aging program, bottling our products, looking at special techniques that we use for fermentation as well. So that's how my day is basically consumed. You know, I'm like a ping pong going between the stills, the fermentation, going into the bones, getting that aroma from there, being in the lab, tasting and nosing. So it keeps me young and fresh, I guess, and I'm pretty eager to come to work every day. So that's a simple overview of what I do. Obviously, I'm supported by a great team here at West Indies Rum. We're about 70 people odd, and most of them are, I would say, in that 5 to 10 year experience range. We have some people here who've been here for 40 years. So I've been blessed to be able to learn from both the older people and the younger people around me.
Fantastic. And I think most people around the world would be very excited to come to work every day if they had your job done. It's, what a wonderful place to be.
Yeah, and you're welcome to come. Anyone who's watching and wants to come into Barbados. I mean, I know it's a bit difficult at the moment, but whenever that opportunity arises, please do. And we'll show you the entire island and obviously our stills and our distillery.
Yeah, it's a wonderful trip, and yeah, beautiful, especially right there on the beach. You've got just one of the most beautiful locations for a distillery anywhere in the world. It's absolutely wonderful. So yes. Wonderful. Well, let's get into the topic of our session. So I wanted to talk about, as I say, dynamic aging. So what is dynamic aging? Where are we at? What's going on? What's it all about? Alexander, do you want to introduce us to the concept of dynamic aging?
Sure. Actually, dynamic aging is a big category of aging that is done with movement, right? So you got the historic side of the dynamic aging is actually the barrels. In the old days, all the rum was shipped in barrels at the time where shipping was very expensive. So, people actually shipped the barrels to the point of consumption or to places where they would be aged further. So the dynamic aging at the time was a natural way of these barrels that were shipped in at sea in the boat with the movement of the sea, where you'd have that beautiful interaction between the rum and the wood. But also people, and that's the dynamic aging. Now, you got some, crazy guys, and I love some of them, who've opened another whole new world of dynamic aging, something we're not going to talk about today, but just so everybody knows, some people put hard rock or hip-hop music full blast in their aging cellars, and I create vibration and calling that dynamic aging. That would belong, I leave you to be judged. Some people love it or whatever, but that's also part of dynamic aging. The dynamic aging we're going to talk about today is the historical dynamic aging. What happens when the rum is shipped in a barrel at sea? So there is the dynamic aging, as you imagine, with the movement. That's why it's called like this. It's nothing that nor Don and I invented. It precedes us by many, many centuries. It's something that belongs to the history of rum, because as you know, rum was, in islands and reached their consumption markets or bottling markets or further aging markets at sea. So that's really the concept of dynamic aging. And it was kind of my grandfather actually was the first one who told me about dynamic aging when I was a teenager learning about distilling. And he's telling me, it was very farming background. So it's just like, kid, this is what happens in a boat when you ship. At the time we're talking about cognac. When you ship a cognac at sea, it's just that much mellower, and you could develop elements of fruits and things like this. And it always sounded a bit romantic to me. And there's a lot of romance in spirit making, and I love these romance, but I spent my life actually verifying or using some of these romances or doing both. And first time I could actually compare the same rum, the same spirit before and after shipment, I really was in awe. I was like, this is incredible. And as soon as we could afford it, we started doing chromatographies, to check what is the rum before shipment and after shipment. And so really, the chromatographies, when you analyze spirits, it's actually really clumsy. The best way to analyze a spirit is really with your nose and your palate. That's the most precise way. But even in a chromatographic analysis, it would show, well, Don and I will show you some elements of we'll take you behind the curtains to show you some of these elements. So that's the dynamic aging. That's what happens when a rum is shipped at sea in its barrel. It's got to be in a wooden barrel. And, and that's what we do at Plantation. When we ship from Barbados and Jamaica, or from Fiji, we actually make sure that the aged rum is shipped inside that barrel to continue to have that interaction.
And so, first of all, I must say I'm slightly disappointed that you're not playing rock music to your casks there in cognac, Alexander. That's maybe we could get Jacques to serenade them instead, and we can.
Don will argue. Don will argue that it should be calypso music.
well, maybe there we go. We can try all different styles, but so that's fascinating though. This idea of shipping barrels of rum in the wooden cask, because of course and for people watching who might not be familiar, typically you would always ship rum in plastic containers, right? Those almost never would be shipped in casks in today's modern rum world. Is that correct?
Well, when rum is shipped in bulk, as you know, in the 20th century, people started shipping bottles, empty bottles to the Caribbean and bottle locally and ship it out already bottled, which is totally fine, but that was an evolution of the 20th century. In the old days, it was shipped in the wooden barrel. And when people ship bulk, you are right, Mitch, it is traditionally either, or not a recent tradition, obviously, either done in stainless steel tank or a plastic drum. I mean, in our case, going back to dynamic aging, it doesn't work with a plastic drum, it doesn't work with a stainless steel tank. You have to do it in a wooden barrel.
And part of that evolution, what we're going to look at today with some of the more the science and some of the figures that you guys have recorded, is looking what that actually does and what that interaction with the wood does on that voyage, and also the oxygen exchange and everything, how that affects so many different elements in the rum. So I think it's very exciting to do. What inspired you to start this in the first place? Was there a light bulb moment where you're like, let's bring back aging and barrels at sea? Was this a lifelong thing? Was this something that you just occurred to you guys? What did you want to prove? What did you want to do with it?
Well, like I told you, I was told at an early age that was actually an improvement to spirits and to cognac. There's actually there's one cognac brand that still does it, and there is actually an aquavit in Norway, Lignée, who does a great job also with dynamic aging. So I was like, this is really part of the heritage of rum. Why not go back to it, I remember Don and I, talking about this and agreeing to tie the barrels inside the container, because you really have to tie the barrels right, because the movement at sea, you don't want to open you have the barrels all knocking on each other's. So that was a bit of work to organize that. And then we did it. And it was really walking in the footsteps of an old method, really. And now we have it down to an art, and we do it systematically with the aged rum.
And I'll say here, Mitch, based on that first experience, we almost stopped doing it. It wasn't the easiest thing to do. But as we became more accustomed to it, I mean, we had the discussion with some older staff members who had done it before. And they were like, okay, guys, don't make it complicated. It's easy to get it in, fix it, strap it. Just be sure the barrels are not weak barrels to begin with, so that when they arrive at the destination, there's still rum inside. So we're now quite proficient at it.
Yeah, I remember, the first shipment, the guys in Barbados would, you would insist on putting plywood, between the barrels layers, and now they load the barrels incredibly. I mean, they just fit these barrels beautifully, and it's wonderful. We actually recycled the plywood, by the way, Don. We made a sports room with it. I just want you to know.
Okay, well, the next time I'm there, I'll have a look at it. Great.
So what does that look like? And Don, you mentioned there were some early challenges with it. So when you're packing barrels to ship them at sea, how do you do that? Do you have to put the barrels themselves inside a container? Do you stack them up? What's your process with that? And why was it such a challenge at the start?
Well, I mean, Mitch, you would appreciate working with a barrel. You have to exercise some care. It's not like the plastic or stainless steel containers where, you're almost sure every single time of how sound that container is. The barrels, as I said, some of them are weaker. Some of the staves may be falling out of place. There's natural expansion and contraction of barrels. So the hoops can become slack. Some barrels are leaking. So basically, our guys are trying to be very gentle. You want to baby it in. You don't want to yanking them and cramming them in. But at the same time, you have to be sure that once it's on the sea, there's not enough motion for the whole structure to collapse. So you want the motion, but you don't want it to be unstable. So it's just finding that sweet spot of how to strap them, how to keep them level inside of the container. And every barrel is not the same. So as I said, we've now become a bit better at it. So we know how to identify any problem barrels. And when they go off to France, we've never had a report of, okay, the barrels are empty, which is our biggest fear. You know, you just want the rum to get
Exactly.
Would you put those barrels in some kind of container themselves so that if the
Yes.
barrels leak,
Yes.
like you could still catch the rum? And
Well, if that's the case, we're only going to send 2 at a time. I mean, normally a container holds about just short of 70 barrels, about 65, 66.
Right.
Yeah, when they're packed in, there's nothing else that's going in there, basically.
Yeah, right. Wow. That's well, it sounds quite exciting. It sounds and it's fascinating that you're bringing it back, and also looking at these, you know, as you said, Alexander, these other examples of companies that have been doing it. You know, Linea Aquavit. I know Tres Hombres have been doing stuff with it as well. So you know, it's not that it's a new thing, but even if we look historically, we look at, you know, what were the origins of this? You know, was it just purely logistical, where barrels just storage, shipping, and getting it there? I guess there was no other way to transport it, right? And now it feels like it's come full circle through being a logistical necessity to being something we age spirits in, to now wanting to bring barrels back and actually choosing to ship in those containers instead.
Well,
So it seems,
you know, Mitch, a lot of great things are born out of necessity, right? And so, you know, at first, people in the old days, remember, were very careful about shipment because shipping was expensive, you know? And so people made the most of it and they shipped into barrels. And, you know, so at the time, you know, in the old days, it didn't make sense to ship empty bottles and then dilute it down the rum and shipping it back to the consumption country. So people would ship it into barrels, and that would be the most efficient way. And then they realized that in the journey, after the journey, the rum would be polished by that process. And so it started, you know, it became really a way to go. So it was born out of necessity for sure, but it designed a specific style. You know, I know you guys have been at it talking about Navy rum. You know, Navy rum was shipped in barrels. So that really is part of dynamic aging systematically. Same thing with dock rums. You know, the dock rums were shipped in barrels. We put a little timeline, if you want, in the presentation, and then we're going to show you a little bit about what we discovered from the history of dynamic aging from the early days of rum, starting really in the 1650, 1655, and then moving on. So there was born out of necessity, became part of rum, you know, and then as, you know, cargo shipment and shipping bottles and so on, it disappeared. And the idea was to go back to the roots of it. And by the way, I want to say there's some great guys also doing it with sailing ships, you know, going, and I really want to salute what they're doing. And they're doing a great job as well. That's part of dynamic aging. And that's also wonderful. And as soon as we can do it and we can afford it, we'll also want to look at that as well. I think it's a beautiful way to do it and going fully full circles.
Fantastic. Well, let's have a look. I know we've got the slides ready now backstage, so maybe we can throw those up and we can have a look at this timeline as well that you've got here, and you can talk us through it. So maybe we can throw that up full screen if we've got the possibility to. Yeah, perfect. So yeah, do you want to take us through to the timeline and give us a little bit of a background history for people who might be new to dynamic aging?
Really quick. And Don, if you want to put it full presentation, you know, on the bottom part, you know, bottom right part. So we'll have the full screen if that's okay. And wonderful. Yeah, go ahead. And then so we wanted to just give you a little background about what we found. You know, we worked with Matt Pietrek and also Dave Wondrich to do research on this. If you want to go to the next slide, Don, will be wonderful. And I don't know if it's you, Don, doing the presentation or Mitch's team. Go ahead if you want to show us next one. So we're just going to do a quick presentation about Navy rum and since when it's been done. Navy rum, as you probably know, has been around we know this, and Matt discovered that from the British Navy since 1655, right? So remember, we discovered the making of rum in 1650 in Barbados. 5 years later, the Navy is already at it, drinking rum, hopefully good rum. And at the time, they were shipping the barrels, right? And so that was what was happening. And if you see in the second slide, right, this one, you'll see a little timeline. And I'm not going to go into details, but it was just to put things in perspective, because Don has prepared, I think, a great part to show you a little later. You see 1655, first recorded time of rum being used by the British Navy, 5 years, after rum is really discovered as we know it, the modern rum in Barbados. And 1731 becomes part of Navy daily ration. And that's in the 17s, what happens, and especially the early 1800s, it is systematically shipped into barrels to the London docks. That's part of the Navy rum. So we wanted to put a little background about what we found in all of this. And I know Matt went to all the different Navy contracts. In the next slide, you'll see, there's a presentation here showing you what really is London dock rum. Well, we're telling you this because, as you can see, if you look at really the must-have of London dock rums, one of it is sailed via boat in wooden cask, dynamic aging. So that is part of the traditional historical way of making London dock rum. The other points are not part of today's presentations, but that is the essence of the London dock rum. And if you look at next slide, it shows you what is Navy rum, and that's the result of much research, both by Matt and Dave. You can see that part of this, dynamic aging is with no fail, was done, and the final blend was done, in the UK, obviously. And there was another really mysterious part of vatting, that was done open sealing vats for about up to 2 years, which I find fascinating as well. But again, you see that it was shipped, in the barrels. So that's really part of the history and it has shaped rum as we know it. And we thought that was fascinating findings to see that was at the time systematic. But you're right, Mitch, when you think about it, it was the rule of necessity. That's the way it was done. And a lot of people gave it up because I like the fact that Don described it. These guys are so good loading the barrels, and now we have it down. But it's a little scary because you are worried that your barrels are going to arrive all broken down, with the movement at sea. Also, something we have discovered, and I think Don is going to show you this a little further, but not only the movement allows the rum to be massaged, and rubbed by the wood. And remember, when barrels are made, some of you may not know, but barrels are assembled before they're filled by having a fire inside the barrel that's going to either toast or char or burn the inside of the wood. So think about the inside of the wood not being like a smooth surface. In fact, some finishes of the barrels inside sometimes are so rough that they're called crocodile finish, like a crocodile skin. So think about the rum rubbing, the skin of that wood, during the whole trip. So there's great interaction. And the second interaction is actually, somebody was asking a question I saw about the climate, the heat and the cold and the differences of temperature, and some of the extreme heat at sea, actually allows certain evolution in the rum that Don is going to show you, that happens, that are quite magical. So if you want to show next slide, there is, now that we showed the background of it, dynamic aging here, you see on the west part, we don't see Don in the picture here because this picture was done in the World War, and Don's been around for 2 years.
Before your time, Don.
I don't think I was born yet, actually.
Yeah, that was before Don's time. And you see on the right, the barrels being loaded. They're loaded first in the small ship going on the bigger ship. That was the old way. And West Indies Rum Distillery used to have its own jetty, as you mentioned earlier, Mitch. The distillery is on the beach. So the jetty was to ship the barrels out, and where the smaller boats could approach and then load the big boat. If you want to show next slide, and then You see some of the barrels being handled, but if you want to show the slide after, right, this one, here we want to show you, before Don explains to you what happens, is what is a typical journey for these lucky barrels. They leave Barbados, and very often there is the boat goes to Jamaica, Kingston, because there's consolidation of these different boats. They take different cargo, and we actually like to use companies that are very slow. The guys that gather different parcels from different islands, because the longer the trip, better it is. Sometimes they call us and they say, "Sorry, guys, we're going to be a month late." And we try to sound like we're sorry, but we're actually super excited because every additional week is another additional interaction. So typically the journey starts from Barbados and then goes to Jamaica and back, to France in Le Havre, and we take it to Cognac. So this is the typical journey. So and we've done an experiment, and it's like, remember the old Romans told by my father and the old master blenders and the master distillers, it does something beautiful to spirits. And recently, again, we're going to show you an experiment that we did a full analysis with the rum before and after shipping. And we're doing that more often than not with different containers. If you want to go to next slide, and you're going to show this, and Don, maybe you did a great presentation here, and just go to it.
Sure, Alexandre. Thank you. So Mitch, if you can just go back one slide to the previous one.
Yeah.
Right. So just to sort of give a background to the experiment, it's actually very simple to do. So we have barrels here that before we ship, we take samples from the barrels. Then the barrels are loaded, they go to France, and when they arrive in France, basically you can take samples at that time. Then we share samples, so half of what we have here in Barbados will go to France, half of what they have in France will come to Barbados. And then we would simultaneous nosing and analysis. But one of the key factors is we must know the environmental conditions as it travels across the ocean. So we do put a sensor in that can guide us in terms of temperature and humidity, which are really the two factors that are most important. The motion or the movement isn't really, we're not able to fully determine the extent of it because the sea conditions vary, but we're confident it's actually quite aggressive throughout the journey from Barbados, Jamaica, and then to France. So yes, you can then go forward to the next one. Right, so this is the chemical or scientific analysis side, which I will go through first. But as Alexandre said earlier, the nose is actually the most important part, and the taste. That's where you get your mouthfeel and that aroma. But we obviously want to know what's in the rum. So the analysis there shows three main characteristics. From the left, the ethanol, which some people know as acetaldehyde. You have an ester in the center, ethyl formate. Obviously, esters give you that fruity note, and depends on which ester it is, will remind you of which fruit, maybe banana, maybe pineapple, maybe mango. And then the main constituent is ethanol, which is what we get when we do rum. Now, the aggressive nature of the motion, the changes in humidity, the changes in temperature, which can vary oxygenation, vary the expansion and the contraction of the wood. So we find all of that process together gives us at the end a difference in certain key parameters and key measures. So the ethanol, that's something in rum when you get off the still is very aggressive on the nose. You can smell it in the rum. As you age over time, you really want that to be less prominent. And we found that the dynamic aging actually has a very big impact on getting that aggressive note out of the rum because it's a more volatile compound. So there's evaporation that occurs, and then there's the interaction with the wood. Acetaldehyde, when it's oxidized, would move basically to an acid, and then you get esters being formed after the interaction with ethanol. So that's why that ethanol decreased. The higher alcohol, similarly, we do get an increase in the concentration of them. And the esters significantly jump there. You can see going from a measure of 59.5 to 90.8. So overall, if you're going to take a nose of those samples, you're going to have a very noticeable difference in the intensity, the aroma that you get from the rum when you nose it. On the taste, equally, the feel on the mouth is very different. You know, you get more mid-body in the rum as opposed to a younger rum, which has an aroma but doesn't have the mouthfeel because it doesn't have those characteristics, those molecules that give you that feel in the mouth. So all the chart is telling you is that there's significant change after a very short in the life of the whole barrel, but a short trip from Barbados to France, and you get a major difference in certain key markers.
So Don, I'd love to sort of like focus on a couple of these figures with you, because I think any of the rum geeks of the world watching will be very interested in sort of honing in on some of these bits. So one of the biggest differences here we're seeing in the chemical analysis you've got is the jump in the esters going from roughly 60 to 90, so about a 50% increase there. And then again with the volatile substances, of which, am I right in thinking you would include the esters as part of the volatiles in that substance? So a big part of that is the ester.
That's just a sum of everything you see there. So yes, the big jump is basically dependent on which of the individual components has jumped the highest.
Yeah, fantastic. So, sorry, say that again, Don.
Right, so I'm agreeing with you, Mitch. The esters, the big jump in esters is the main reason you see such a dramatic increase in your volatile substances.
Fantastic. And one of the things which I think is interesting to know, I know esters is a hot word in the rum world right now. Everyone loves to talk about esters and how many esters you can drink. And I've got a couple of friends. I always talk about Chris in Amsterdam, who loves drinking his Long Pond Tecker and saying, "Oh, this is how rum should be." I'm like, "What are you doing? It's rocket fuel." But esters is a hot word in the rum world, and we talk about esters a lot. And we talk about how many esters each rum has. Now, this is a significant jump for what is essentially a 36-day journey altogether, and that for going up from 59 to 90 is a big step. One of the parts I'm interested to look at though is the rum that you sent was 5 years old, correct?
Yes,
correct.
5 years old, aged in Barbados. Oh, sorry, say that again.
No, I was saying that one is 5 years old, but we are doing it with different ages as well. But the focus for this one was 5 years.
And when you ship those barrels, so one of the things which I know the rum nerds will know, but in case you don't know, one of the things that can happen, you can have esterification, this development of esters you can have happen in fermentation, distillation, but also aging in the barrel itself. Yeah. And part of that aging in the barrel normally happens over a very, very extended period of time. And a lot of that, my understanding is, Don, that comes from partly the angel share, the oxygenation in the barrel, breaking down the aldehydes into the esters. So when you're sending those 5-year-old barrels, are you marrying them first? Are they full barrels? Are you shipping them with their angel share to whatever level it is so that they're semi-empty? How do you ship those barrels initially?
Okay, they are generally full barrels. So in the Caribbean, the angel share can be significantly higher. But I think it also lends to the uniqueness of the rums we have here. But before we ship, we basically try to be sure that every barrel is as full as possible.
Right.
Not for any scientific reasons, really. That's actually for more customs reasons. Just to be sure when the rum gets there and we say this barrel contains approximately 200 liters, the customer will say, yes, we agree. So yes, the barrels all go pretty full.
Absolutely. And it makes sense from a shipping point of view, right? Well, why would you send a load of half-empty barrels? So, but when I first looked
Mitch?
at this presentation, when you sent it through, that was my first idea, was like, oh, maybe the esters have jumped up so much because there was already more oxygen in the barrels. So if the barrels are full, this for me shows even more that, you know, how much dynamic aging is playing an impact on this. Because if it's not, you know, half empty barrels and extra oxygen just being swished around, that's quite incredible, the jump up.
Yeah.
So Mitch, if I may jump in real quick on this one, you know, we show you some, and you show on the chart, you see what kind of flavors and enhanced by this drip, and we're really walking in the footsteps of guys being doing this like 200 years ago, right? And we are actually only lifting the veil and understanding things. The best guide, guys, is really by doing it with the palate. We're showing you an analysis here, which is kind of like, was my palate telling me, is that really true, right? Because there's a lot of romance with spirits, and what we like to do at West Indies Rum Distillery and at Plantation is to look at these facts. We kind of like verifying what our palates is telling us. And to tell you the whole picture on this, movement has an impact, but also temperature probably has an impact, because as you guys may know, and of course, you know, this is every day's done work, but what we know is that when you have the heat, you have also alcohol and certain element of acidity of the rum are morphing into some of these esters, these beautiful esters. And, you know, so that's something that's also something to consider. And we don't know everything that's happening. We're still discovering. You know, we're looking at this with humble eyes. You know, we're looking at this, we're like, wow, you know, that's actually a fact. We knew it from many years by tasting it, but we're looking at this and we're saying, this is really what's happening. But again, you can look at a chart, but at the end of the day, the truth is in the glass. And we think that's kind of fun. And that's why we do it, you know, systematically, because you're right. We ship full barrels because, you know, for, you know, having more efficiency of shipment, right? Because this is the same energy.
It'd be incredibly unenvironmental to ship half empty barrels, I guess. But yeah, it's
exactly.
But yeah, but it would be fascinating as well to see how much more that affected it as well. That would be just one random barrel in there that's half empty. See what that does.
Hey, why not?
Yeah, I like your thinking, Mitch. I like your thinking. You maybe try that one for the next trip.
And obviously you've got to put the boombox in there as well to just give it the extra push.
Fair enough. But numbers are great to look at. I mean, what's an experiment without some numbers to show? But as Alexandre, the real joy is in the nose and the taste, where we get to actually experience the differences. I can look at numbers all day, but they don't excite me the same way as nosing and tasting.
Agreed, Don.
It's interesting, isn't it? We spend so much time, you know, looking at these things, but yeah, at the end of the day, you pick up the glass, you drink the rum, and you know it's good or you know it's not.
Yeah.
And I suppose this sort of leads me to my next question, like, how much worth do you see in this? Because it is fascinating to see how it affects the rum, and it is fascinating to see this, that you could get this level of esterification over 35 days, that you could get this level of jump up in volatiles and everything else. But, you know, at the end of the day, what goes into someone's glass is the juice worth the squeeze? You know, is the cost, the extra expense of shipping the barrels this way, is it worth it when it comes down to what you're going to pour and drink and enjoy?
Well, I think it's a great question. And then look at it. If you do it like this, and why the guys were doing it in the old days, is that also it's a save of energy. You ship foolproof rum that way. And so you don't have to ship empty bottles to Barbados or to Jamaica and then reduce down the rum locally and then ship it out, right? So we feel, you know, there's an energy savings, and that time where I think the planet has burned enough oil, you know, if we can do this, you know, we think and we're saying this very humbly, you know, everybody is trying their best and we're trying our best too. And to tell you the truth, if we want to go all the way with this, we're going to have to do it with sailing ships. We tried with Andrew's cousin, Andrew, who works with Don and runs the distillery with Don, as a cousin, who has like a sailing ship, but the cousin, we talked for a little while, and we didn't know how much rum would be left at the end of the trip. He was somebody that likes the good life on the sea and a great gentleman, but we're like, okay, we have to look at this where we can actually do it on a regular basis and so on. And great guy, but then we said, okay, the boat was not very big, and so we're looking at options where it also makes sense in terms of financing to do it with sailing ships. So right now we're doing it with regular cargo, and which is our first step. And in terms of economy and in terms of carbon footprint, we have studied that, and it does make sense. And the fact that it is a lot of work. I totally agree with Don. I mean, we've loaded containers together, but it's when you taste the rum, there's something you can measure on the chart like that. But really what you have to think, Mitch, is the taste itself, with things you cannot even measure, because there's another element that you can't measure, is what we call fondu, is the integration of the different elements. When these barrels being swooshed around like this, then it integrates even more and gives the rum a very specific polish. But don't think like this is the one thing that makes plantation delicious. Whatever, quality is the sum of so many things. And the beauty of rum is that many people have different ways of doing things, and there's so many delicious rum out there nowadays. And that's something that we're just in a very humble and nice way, we're saying, just look at what we found. And if it is something that is good, it's good also for an environment with the barrels. Remember, the barrels, instead of being finished when they are in Barbados, they can go for another trip, and they go to France. And once they arrive here, I have a lot of friends in Scotland or beer makers that they can't wait to use these beautiful rum barrels. So the barrels go to another cycle of life, and that's so many trees that be cut down. So the barrels at first, come, in that case, they're bourbon barrels. They go to Barbados to do their aging. And once they do their work, the last trip, they go to France, the last big trip. And after that, they might do another trip to Scotland or go somewhere in France where they're making, whiskey, Scotland, or beer, etc. So it's a full circle that I think makes sense also if you do it, if you're willing to take the time.
So, Alexander, one of the things I know you're very passionate about, and in a lot of the conversations we've had, you love experimenting and trialing different types of wood and different types of casks, like acacia barrels, chestnuts. I've seen you use a multitude of different barrels before. How much do you feel like that would have an effect on dynamic aging? Do you have plans to try different casks and ship a variety of woods to see how each of them have an impact?
Mitch, I love the way you think. Yeah. Yes, it is, something that the team at West Indies Rum and Don and his team and Andrew, and they're incredible technical guys. They're just incredible. And we're fascinated, as you know, with the long history of rum and the way in the old days people were fixing barrels with other type of wood. There was a document in the distillery at West Indies where they say they were fixing barrels with mango tree, or we only with sustainable wood. I insist on this. So as long as we make sure it's sustainable, then yes, we're going to restave or change the caps of the barrels with this different woods and start doing experimenting with shipping, with that. We find though, Mitch, that yes, there is, as you've seen in the chart presented by Don, there is what we call dry extract, so elements from the wood that are picked up during that trip, but also so the reference. That's why your question is very valid. So there is an effect of the nature of the wood, as it would be during aging, but also the movement, and the heat and the difference of temperature has a great effect. I just saw a little question I cannot evade, that says, can that be simulated? I must pay respect to one of our brothers who passed away not so long ago, Rocky, who one day and called me, and Rocky was one man of our industry, and he calls me Liverpool. And Rocky says, I love this thing about dynamic aging. And a friend of mine, we have an idea. He's running a hotel in Seattle, and he figured, he's willing to strap a rum barrel on the top of the elevator So every time somebody goes up and down, the barrel is going to go through dynamic aging, and they're going to have their own reserve in the hotel. And you knew Rocky, right? So you can see how Rocky got excited. I was like, yeah, that's exciting, Rocky, but this is a liquid in a very electric environment, an elevator. And while, making delicious rum is what any trial, putting somebody who's riding that elevator at a risk they don't know about is not something we found such a good idea, And so people, and I just couldn't help thinking about Rocky when I saw this question. Can it be simulated? Go ahead.
Just imagine though, Alexander, being stuck in that lift and then beautiful, delicious rum dripping down. Like, you'd be like, leave me here a few more hours. It's fine. It's
Mitch, just to add something to that, as I said, I've been here a long time at the distillery, but it's only in the last couple of years that I've now been driving around looking for any type of tree that has fallen that we can perhaps make use of. So as Alexander said, it has to be done sustainably. I'm not going out there with an axe or a chainsaw. If I do something that has fallen
don't have to pay you more, Don.
Don't you do that?
We know that we have a small cooperage. So we have guys here who are skilled enough that if they get their hands on the right wood, we can make a head, or we can carve out a stave. So we would be able to then experiment, maybe not with an entirely new barrel made of that one wood, but just to put components of it to see if there's then an impact both from the static aging and then ultimately from dynamic aging.
So Don, what are the native woods of Barbados? What woods do you have to play with that you could potentially find if the trees were to fall down?
Well, you're going out of my expertise a bit, but I mean, we have mastic here, which was one of the first. But it's hard for me to identify any given tree just by seeing it. Mango is easily identifiable, but mango trees, they're there for a very long time. They don't grow rapidly, but they don't just die or fall quite easily. So it'll be rare to get a mango tree, but we'll find one eventually. Mahogany is a wood, but I don't think we're going to use that for aging. That's one of the main trees in Barbados as you drive around. I'd have to probably take a walk through some of the nature reserves we have here, and like there are some places that have the Latin name and the colloquial name as well. So I've got to re-educate myself on a lot of these things, but we are on the lookout. We are going to obviously use a lot of the local expertise, and there are some guys who are working anymore, retired, who still are sharing knowledge with us. So as Alexander said, it's not an exact sciences yet. We are still at the early stages trying to find out a lot more, but you can stay tuned and we will keep you informed.
So I just want to throw something in there and tell Don, because he doesn't know yet, but the guy at West Indies that Don knows, in the archives found that mango wood was used to fix up barrels. And my good friend Liam Costello, the master distiller at Rumco of Fiji, there was a big storm a couple of months ago in Fiji, and some trees, mango trees, fell down, unfortunately. And instead of being put down and put to burn, or and so he was able to set some aside, Don. So we're going to be receiving enough wood to do a few caps for the barrels and walk in the footsteps of guys making rum in the late 1800s. This is going to happen very soon, Don.
Okay, well, thanks for telling me now. I'll let you go.
You heard it here first.
It's happening, guys.
Alexander, I love you. This is everything.
You don't need to drive around anymore looking for fallen mango trees. You found one.
Alexander, if you have any more like brand new releases or new products or anything, I can imagine Angelique quivering in the background. Please feel free to share.
I didn't tell marketing, by the way. So please don't tell them right away. Don't tell Angelique; she's gonna hate me.
I'm sure they're not watching.
Yeah. So but we're gonna do this, and when you have a few caps, Don knows. When you need to toast the cap of a barrel, as you know, barrel, you cannot use it raw. You know, when you make the barrel has to be exposed to wood. You have to toast it, because the way you toast wood is the way you toast. Think about toasting bread. Think about the toast you eat in the morning. They don't taste the same depending how long you toast them in the toaster, right? Next time you toast, you can char it. It's a different taste than when you toast it, and different level of toast will deliver different flavors. That's what we do with wood, you know, when we make barrels. And so
I love that analogy.
we'll
It's so
Coopers
good.
units made from 1930 back at the distillery. And when you have to toast the cap of a barrel, you just need a good friend who owns a pizzeria, and you can actually toast the cap of the barrel in the pizza oven. So you don't need a full unit, and then you can recap your barrel and do your little experiments. So you know it's helpful. It's helpful to know.
Okay, so this is the second reference to pizza. So after my total rum, clearly I need to find some pizza. But yeah, we do have some pizza. We already told them, listen, when we get the head, we want to use your oven, and they've agreed. So we're just waiting for the wood to appear.
Trust me, Dawn and I right now are definitely looking for a friend with a pizza oven to get us through the next 14 hours.
The disembodied voice is saying pizza is on order.
Oh, pizza's on the way. It's going to be okay.
So Mitch, Don had prepared a little slide to show you. You know, Mitch, you're very familiar about the esters and the different elements, you know, what they bring to the rum. So the next slide Don had prepared was to show everybody, if they want to know. Again, don't think science explains spirits. Stick to your nose and your palate. But we wanted to show you, you know, when we talk about these crazy names, you know, don't be impressed. Your nose and your palate is really what matters. But you know, you can see what Don was talking about. Don't go crazy with this. Again, your palate and your nose is more important. But these are the things that are important in the taste of your. This is what happens, you know, in some of the elements and compounds in taste of your rum.
Yeah, Mitch. And basically, when you're nosing rum, I don't think any of these chemical names come to mind. I mean,
I'm getting a little butanol. Yes, wonderful. My favorite.
Yeah, it's always about some food or some memory you have food related. So you're going to get the full. As I said, you can see it there, the diagram, the word esters is just below the word fruits. Sometimes it's about a ripe fruit. Sometimes it's more of a green fruit, like say apple. You get the berries, you get the pineapple. So it depends on the precursors, the esters you had up front, the acids you had up front, basically dictates which ester forms. And also you get a bit of the wood sugar being part of this whole process. So esters are there, and then a whole range of volatile compounds called higher alcohols. And the predominant alcohol is ethanol, but you get longer chain alcohols, butanol, propanol, and then the names get fancier. These high alcohols do serve a purpose in that they give a different food group or different sensation on your nose. That aroma is more like, and the taste is more, let's say, a chocolatey taste. And it helps with the mouthfeel, that sort of heavy-bodied nature of the rum. When you drink it, those higher alcohols are what are really basically driving that feel for you. There are other compounds, again, ethanol, as I mentioned, is acetaldehyde. Acetal, that nose is going to give you something more like green, like almost like reminiscent of grass being freshly cut. Some of those things are good in small quantities, but you don't want them there in very large quantities because they can overpower quite a lot of the other aromas that you're gonna detect. And the barrel, obviously, now that time in the barrel, the expansion of the barrel, the oxygenation that occurs, then the transfer from different organic groups, aldehydes through to acids, and then to esters. So that whole grouping is what gives you that body within the rum, that aroma and that feel, that texture when you taste it. Most of these are formed at fermentation level. You can then, depending on the equipment you're using at the still, selectively leave some behind or discard others. Then the barrel adds the finishing touch, and the step you're talking about, the dynamic agent, even enhances them a bit more. So it's a multi-step process. Each stage is very important. And at the end of the day is what gives the bouquet that people love to experience when they taste and smell rum.
I really love that distinction that you made there, Don, as well. That you can form all of these different things through fermentation, but you can choose to leave certain ones behind in distillation. That's a really, I think that's a really important distinction to make. Because I think to one level you might be thinking, oh, let's create all these crazy flavors and all these different things, and you want to get it all, but obviously, in your distillation process, you are choosing what you take forward and what ends up in the final rum, and it's a really, really nice distinction. I think that's really great.
Yes, I mean, obviously, if you get more of them at fermentation, it makes the job of the distiller easier in a way, because you now have more flexibility, more options. So that so you can have different marks. You can selectively say, well, okay, this is my high ester range, or this range has a different balance between the higher alcohols and the esters, or based on what you use, what substrate, is it molasses, is it cane juice, what type of yeast. Even that level now you're getting at the fermentation, where you can use different types of yeast to determine a flavor profile. So it's never ending, basically, so we've not even scratched the surface, I think, of what's possible to produce.
And you mentioned marks there as well, which again is another hot term. People are like looking at how many marks each distillery making. Do you have a set range of marks that you make? Do you have a certain quantity, or are you constantly experimenting? Where do you sit with that?
Well, I think most distilleries would have a set standard range of marks, but they're not limited to those alone. Those are probably just what their existing customers or product profiles have caused them to focus on. But as I said, almost limitless. Is like a palette of colors. You have white on one end or multicolors on the next, and you can get any range in between. So I think it just is limited by our imagination. What we want to detect by the nose, what we want to taste, what we want people to experience. If we do something and people like it, well, that becomes a mark, basically.
Also, I'm going to share a little secret, Don. I think the people should know is that as we speak, something beautiful is happening at West Indies Rum Distillery. We had made a decision 3 years ago, the team and I, to actually go back to wooden vat fermentation, which was the tradition of West Indies Rum Distillery in the 1960s. Until the 1960s, 100% of the rum that was distilled at West Indies Rum Distillery, right on the beach there, was fermented into wooden vats. As people may know, when you ferment in a wooden vat, the wooden vat becomes a habitat of a lot of the yeast and different bacteria that become and starts to design a specific heavier taste profile. And so people progressively made it easier in stainless steel vat. So most fermentations now are made in stainless steel vat. But the beauty of a wooden vat is going back to these old, traditional way that takes a longer to ferment, to get these elements totally developed. So, something's happening right now. We have a little over 10 beautiful wooden vats. A couple of them are made with French wood. The rest is made with green oak and cedar. So we're, as you know, West Indies Rum has the last double batch pot still, the Greg Farm still, dating back from 1850. But this still soon is going to be filled. We have had already 2 wooden vats where we experienced, but now, we're having some more that are being installed as we speak to have further wooden vat fermentation, which gives this very richer, very interesting rum. So we want to continue and enhance all of this, and it is happening as we speak. So probably not so far from where Don is sitting right now. I just wanted to share with everybody, and everybody, as soon as we can all travel again, you guys should come over at the distillery and you'll taste it straight from the still. It's beautiful rum.
I look forward to it. What kind of capacity are we talking for these vats, Alexander?
Well, they are different capacities, and Don will give you the exact specs. You know, they're usually, you know, they're not huge because remember your question about the marks. That's why it triggered this little secret I wanted to share with everyone. You know, the marks are in Jamaica elements that are reference of different taste profiles. In the old days, there were some rum marks in Barbados, but they were not registered by the government the way it is in Jamaica. But we have our own rum marks, and we are, as we speak, creating, as Don was referring to, new rum marks, you know, with this type of distillation. So the different vats that are arriving right now. Don, you want to explain quickly the range? You know, there's a couple French wooden vats that actually I sent here from Cognac, but the rest are actually made in Mexico from cedar by the same pooper, by the way, who's helped us fix a Long Pond, a distillery, wooden vat fermentation capacity. But you know, why I want to tell you, I mean, not to go into great details, obviously, but we had to shoehorn these vats, you know, in the middle of the distillery that it was built in the 19th century. So we had to shoehorn, so each vat is a different size, to shoehorn it in the very old historical part of the distillery, different sizes. You just want to give the range real quick?
Yeah, they're not large, Mitch, at the moment, and there'll be different sizes, but you can say between what we presently have and what we are working with now to put into use, you're going to range anywhere between 8,000 up to about 15,000 liters at the liquid capacity before you then ferment. And within that, you're going to get a range of alcohols, depends on, again, the type of yeast, how much sugar we put in up front, how long the fermentation is. So the fermentation time will vary, and then the end concentration will vary. So every time we do a batch, that may end up being one full run on a pot. Sometimes it may mean that we have to use 2 fermenters. But the real key is how can we use the wood properly, as Alexandre said, to grow natural flora, a natural bacteria that's going to occur in our environment that we don't want to lose out of the wood. So there'll be no specialized cleaning of those vats. You want after each fermentation for the next round, you want there to be an increase in the natural or wild yeast that's there, or even any natural bacteria that's there, and that then helps the flavor profile for the next fermentation.
Another little secret, Don, I think we should share with everyone, is that we have you know, there is all these old documents in the vault, you know, in Barbados at the distillery. And then, you know, the guy who spends the most time doing this is Andrew, and he was running the distillery with Don, and we found some blueprint, literally blueprint. They're like blue, and from the very, very old, some from the early part of the 20th century, about the different stills that the distillery ever had, and some also projects that happened or didn't. We don't know everything, you know, what happened every day in the distillery. And with this drawing was a great inspiration to build another from reclaimed copper, actually from very old copper that we're recycling again. And we have built, it's finished now, another double batch distillation. People probably know there's the retort system where it's a pot still that feeds into smaller pots. So you run it once through, that's called a retort system that you see in the Caribbeans. But before the retort was invented, there was the double batch system. It was much more primitive. You distill once, and when you finish with this distillation, you put it back to the still or another still. So it's a lot of work, but it's great because you get the precision to cut the heads and the tails during the first distillation and during the second distillation. So we couldn't help by making another baby we're going to call the hot pot, and that's going to make its way to Barbados very, 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 very soon. So I want everybody to know that the hot pot is going to be on its way mid-August, you know, and so not only because the old Greg still built in the 1850s is an old lady, a beautiful old lady making beautiful rum, but we have to make sure we don't wear it out. So that's why we're getting a younger sister with the hot pot, you know, that is going to make it out of Barbados. So we're you know, working on these old style rums by using the you know, and it makes heavier rum, obviously, and the heavier rum, the more impact we feel that the dynamic aging is going to have, obviously, because you're going to have some element of alcohol and some element of acidity and the esters creating more esters.
Well, this was going to be one of my questions for you, Don, in terms of when you started this experimentation, and the barrels you chose to go at sea originally for this experiment, and also what you do going forward. Like, surely the more volatiles, the more esters, everything, the more you start with, the more you're going to get at the end. You know, surely that's going to multiply heavier. So do you select heavier barrels? Do you select more pot still heavy barrels? Like, what's your selection process for the rums you're actually going to send on this voyage?
Right. So we are about to do another test or round of experiments. What I can say for sure is if the percentage change will occur in the same way every single time. So you may start out with heavier rum, but it may not give you the same, say, almost 50% increase. It may not be that straightforward. So we've now got to build up a repository of information just to get a better handle on, you know, how will each type of rum or each type of barrel, how will that react across the sea? And obviously there are factors we don't control. The temperature and humidity every time, you maybe can do it by time of year. I saw someone ask about the seasons. Here in the Caribbean, there's not many seasons. There's you can call it a wet season and a dry season. So humidity is one of the factors that would change. So the time of the year that you ship could also be an impact. But the motion on the ocean, who knows? You know, you can get very flat oceans one time, or very choppy. You know, there's lots of undulation. So yeah, Mitch, basically we're going to try different things, different age rums, different style of rums, be it from the pot still, a blend of pot and column, rums with different weights, you know, some with heavy esters, some with not as many esters, and then looking at the different types of wood. So early stages, but there's lots to do, and hopefully if we are back here at this time next year to celebrate 51st anniversary, we should have some more information to give to you.
Well, we'll let you know tomorrow whether or not we're going to actually try another 24 hours. But we might make it a little bit more, easygoing.
Right.
Well, maybe we can come to Barbados. Maybe the flights will be going again then, so we can do that.
Yeah,
that'll be much nicer. Let's do that, in fact.
Remember, we have a welcome stamp passport. You're free to come to work from Barbados for 1 year. So
I heard.
This could be your last day of working next year.
You know,
I think Dawn's in on this as well. I think we both want to come and work remotely in Barbados. We'll take our 12 months.
Hold on, I'm coming back. Yeah, I'd like to work in Barbados if that could be arranged.
Listen, the information is up there on a website somewhere. I could probably even send you the link, and then you're free to look at it carefully and decide. You know, so want to start.
So Mitch and I have actually, we're building a tour at the moment. Apparently everyone's offering us distillery visits and trips to various islands. We'll see what happens, but
we're inviting ourselves along. But no, it's actually, but genuinely for everyone who's watching, this is an incredible thing, right? Because of, and I don't know if this was the result of COVID and the lockdowns and everything that's happening, but Barbados now offers a 12-month visitor stamp. You can work remotely in Barbados and live on a paradise island. You just need a laptop and some Wi-Fi.
I mean, Trudy Ann was already said that Mitch and I could come. So, you know, I'm on a boat, bus, train, airplane.
It's called a welcome stamp, and yes, it is as a direct result of all of the lockdowns. I mean, we are heavily tourism dependent, and that has obviously taken a downturn, a very significant downturn. We're trying to find creative ways of inviting people back here. It's safe as far as we know right now. You know, come in and enjoy yourselves. You have to work. I hope if you're a company, maybe you're self-employed, maybe you're not, but we're not going to babysit you to be sure you're working. You're free to do it from the beach or from your room in the hotel or the villa or next to the pool. It's up to you.
There's only one tiny technical problem from my side, is that Sekinda didn't even let me work from home during COVID, so I'm not sure I'm going to convince him about Barbados.
But if you come to the distillery, we'll have enough work here for you to do. So you can always.
I attest to that. I attest to that.
Right.
We're doing a lot of different things.
Barrels.
Hey, you've been expert in that year, trust me.
I'm a good worker, you know. I can go for 24 hours apparently.
Wonderful. So tell us. So what is coming up next? Are we going to see some dynamically aged releases from Plantation? Are we going to see some new exciting one-off West Indies things? What's going on? What can you spill the beans on, Alexander, and what will drive Angelique up the wall?
You're trying to get me. You're trying to get me in trouble as usual, right?
Always.
So,
yes.
you know, there's one secret I cannot tell you because definitely I would be hunged. I was almost there.
That's the kind of secret you need to tell us.
I just shared quite a few, Don. I just already shared quite a few. But what I want to say, you have to keep in mind that little process we want to share with you, which is, yes, a geeky part of rum making, but that's part of the heritage of rum, that we are very bound, the team at West Indies and at Plantation, to not only research, but to safeguard. It's something that's part of the heritage of rum. And actually, all the aged rum that we get from West Indies Rum Distillery that we ship here is shipped inside the barrel. So they all go through the process that we described. So that's actually a signature style of Plantation Rum as we drink it, you know, when it is in the aged expressions. So that's something that you already have. I have a little dream that I'll share with you with next presentation that I shared. Don knows, and we can't tell you yet, but I is going to take this to the next level, obviously with the dynamic aging. But every plantation, you know, obviously that is aged goes through that process, and it takes a while. When we work, as you know, when we work with other distilleries, Fiji is a good example. You know, we have to talk quite a lot to convince the distillery to start loading the barrels instead of just doing drums or etc. So, you know, Fiji now is dynamically aged as well. And again, it's one, you know, small part in a greater picture, because as Don showed you, and John is very talented, you know, Don is a very talented distiller, and he knows very well, very experienced, very seasoned. You know, this is all these different things from the beginning, from the substrate you use to distillation to every fermentation, very important steps. But also there's many experiments happening at West Indies Rum Distillery. You know, recently I was with Don and Andrew at a meeting in Barbados, and we're talking with someone else. I forgot who it was, a supplier of some kind of order. And then, you know, we had a little bit of small talk at one point. And Andrew says, yes, a lot is happening at West Indies Rum Distillery. We are not projects. And life has been, and I'm so proud to work with them on a team, because they like us, they like me, they feed out of these projects. And what we showed you today is just a little part, but all the sum of these little parts make a great difference at the end of the day. And we're working very hard on all these little parts. So you talked about the different woods that we are researching. That's very important. You know, the different yeast, you know, natural yeast, but also cultured yeast that you can actually choose from specific lots and recultivate it, you know. And the fact that, I don't know if you see this, but we are working to make this small batch we talked about, you know, going back to all the ways to make them even a little more intense, you know, in the way they're done. So we have a full palette of rum, because the beauty of it, as you know, West Indies Rum's got a distilling apparatus of all kind. You know, we have chamber stills. So I'm going to throw something right there. There will be a chamber still expression at one point. Sorry, Angelique. You know, from West Indies Rum Distillery, obviously.
Don, are you making that one?
So, okay, I'm in trouble now. Thank you, guys.
I'm making notes.
You know, because you better get busy.
Don, you know, Don remembers when the You remember when the chamber still was working, right? Don was not only digger, right?
I was here when.
So you're telling me the chamber still doesn't work, so he's got to make it work first.
No.
Yeah, no.
Need a little.
No. This chamber still was put to retire. For some people who know a chamber still, there's only one left from the 19th century, and it's right next to where Don is sitting right now, not so far, and at the distillery. Don is at the distillery now, and the chamber still is an old way of distilling that has disappeared. It's part of the history books. And as I walked in the distillery long time ago, at the time as a customer, buying bulk rum, and I see this still, and that was the predecessor of Don, Red Harris, an older guy. And I said, Don, is that a chamber still? And he says, oh, you know about chamber still? It's a chamber still. And so the minute we went into a partnership together, with West Indies Rum Distillery, we looked at that as a marriage, really. We worked together. And then we put back the chamber still to work. So it's been making rum for how long, Don? When did we recommission it all together? I don't have a good sense of memory of dates.
It's now at least 2 years since we've started up again. But when I first started, it was a daily operation for us. But then after about 2 or so years, we had enough from it. It was actually at that time needed some care and attention. So we left it alone for a while, and for the last 2 years now, it's been resurrected and working very well.
And you guys should know that in the 1930s, in the 1930s,
you're gonna get
okay.
It would, Alexander, it would not be a session with you if we didn't run out of time and run over. But unfortunately, the next 18 hours depend on it. I'm very excited to try your.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure.
On the World Exclusive. It's wonderful to have you both.
Thank you.
And we'll see you very soon in Barbados.
Thanks, Don.
Bye.
Much love to everybody.
Thank you very much for joining us. Take care.